am so excited that Candy asked me to come along on this journey with her this year. And I am so excited for you to join in with us as well.
Yeah, and actually we have our emails up there right now. So feel free to jot them down. Hopefully we can keep in touch. We'll put them up again at the end of the session, but hopefully you will be excited about maybe joining in on this little journey with us. All right, so here we go. Why did we decide to focus on this work with the sentence? Good question. And to kind of get us started, one of the things that I believe very strongly in is that especially our youngest writers, are super intimidated when it comes to getting their thoughts on the paper. It can certainly be scary to compose an entire piece of writing. Mm-hmm. And what Meredith and I have been talking about a lot lately is if we could perhaps have more of an emphasis on crafting strong sentences and really stick to instructing more at the sentence level than perhaps we do right now, could we help students build not only their confidence, but their writing stamina?
Yeah, one of the biggest things I see that my students struggle with is when they are faced with that blank paper and they know that they need to have that finished piece. It can be very overwhelming just to put the pencil to the paper. And then a lot of times we start to see students think about quantity instead of quality. And we have students that write so many sentences because they're so focused on having that finished writing piece and having a lot on the paper. So we really think that just by taking that step back, focusing in on those individual sentences is really going to benefit all of our writers.
Absolutely. So this year, what we're hoping to do is sort of surround ourselves and the students with some really meaningful talk about that sentence work. And our goal for our time with all of you this morning is to kind of think about it in terms of, it's September, it's the beginning of the year, you still have the whole year ahead of you. And, how can we maybe give you some ideas for how you can set up your classrooms and provide kind of those spaces and places for you to do some of this work all year long?
And one of my favorite things when I go to PD is to find something that I can bring back the next time I'm in the classroom and try it. So we're really excited today to give you so many ideas of things you can start on Monday in your own classroom.
Absolutely. So we're gonna move along here to kind of something that we need to set the stage and have a little conversation first before we can move forward. One of the things in our school district that we do is that we assess students' writing through the lenses of the 6 traits. We love to do this because it definitely allows us to narrow in on a focus for what goals we need to set for our writers. But as a supervisor in the district, I get the opportunity to talk to so many teachers, and I would say that predominantly the conversation I have most times about students' writing centers around organization, ideas, and word choice. Teachers always want to talk about, oh gosh, Candy, I'm having trouble getting the kids to organize their thoughts. Their writing's not making any sense. Sometimes that's obviously related to organization. Ideas is another big trait that comes up all the time for those kids who maybe aren't really adding much on the paper. And if they have details at all, they're not perhaps well developed. So teachers like to talk about that. And lastly, word choice. Sometimes it's not just about adding lots of details, but helping kids narrow in on their specific word choices. That comes up all the time as well. One of the things, though, that Meredith and I have been talking a lot about is that we have conventions highlighted here in red, and that definitely is something we touch on.
Oh, definitely. But we really tend to focus on capitalization, punctuation, and spelling.
Absolutely. And the problem with that is that underneath sort of that umbrella of conventions is also that kind of scary G word that we sometimes, hide from, which is grammar. And that's definitely where we're going to be putting a lot of the emphasis for our work this year. Because the way that I've been looking at this lately is that grammar is also directly related to that green highlighted trait there of sentence fluency, which I can promise you that is something very rarely I engage in conversation about with teachers when it comes to conferring with kids about their writing. I don't often hear teachers, saying, oh, I really want to sort of, teach into that particular trait with my students. And what we're starting to think about is how the grammar piece and the sentence fluency piece go hand in hand. Because again, sentence fluency is really very magical, and we need to pay more attention to it because it's all about the way that the words and phrases sound in a sentence, but not just within a sentence, but how do those sentences sound when they're read one after the other? And if we can kind of figure this out, maybe, I don't know, we've got that voice thing is like out in the middle there. How do we feel about that?
So I feel like voice is what we all want our students to have, but it is definitely the hardest thing for us to teach.
Absolutely. We were joking around earlier. We were saying voice. It seems to be a big. Kids like to talk about unicorns right now. So voice is almost like that unicorn magical trait that's kind of hard to, it's kind of hard to nail down exactly what's going on with that. So we're hoping for the best. But here's our kind of different approach that we're going to be taking this year. And it's not really all that different, but just reframing the way we're thinking about these traits. And if we are putting more of an emphasis on our sentence fluency work and our grammar work together, what we're hoping is that that emphasis will sort of kind of hug or influence how the students are doing in all of those other areas as well. So for example, when we think about organization, once we start to get to talk to the students about transitional phrases at the beginning of sentences, obviously that will have a positive impact on the students' organization in their writing. Thinking about ideas, obviously parts of speech work is something that we're going to be doing a lot of this year. And what we're hoping is that when we look at the parts of the sentences more closely, it will help students to actually build and develop more ideas in their writing. And then the one thing we want to be careful about is that what we don't want is for students to think that long sentences are always better sentences, that sometimes we need to zoom in and zero in on those sentences and also think really hard about our word choice as well. So again, all of these things, hopefully, if we're doing this all together, then it will have an impact on the student's voice as well.
Yes. We're hoping to get to the heart of their writing, their voice, and I really think that this is a great way that this can become more direct instruction with their voice.
So again, right now that we've kind of talked about those different traits, this might be a good time to kind of stop and pause and maybe think for yourself a little bit about when you work with your student writers, what are the traits that kind of, seem to pop out the most for you? What are the areas here where you seem to do your most work with students? So whether you're tweeting or whether you're popping something into the chat, go ahead and do that, and we'll give you a couple minutes and then we'll move on. Not really a couple minutes. We don't have that much time.
Just a few seconds.
So we're gonna probably keep moving on anyway as you share that with us. But again, as we move along, then just to kind of ground our work together today, one of the things we wanted to remind everybody is that what is our question that we're trying to answer? What are we talking about today? And that is whether we could make maybe a more concerted effort and have more consistent emphasis on this connection between sentence fluency and conventions, particularly grammar. Will this help to improve our students' writing? And when we talk about grammar, I mean, again, it's embedded under that umbrella of conventions. And as Meredith and I were just talking about, we know, as Meredith said, we focus on the spelling, the punctuation, and the capitalization. But again, grammar is a part of conventions, and it's definitely something, as Jeff Anderson always reminds us, that these are the things readers are expecting a courteous writer to do. And we thought that was kind of something that we wanted to keep in mind as we were moving forward with this work.
Yeah, we definitely, like Candy said, spelling, punctuation, capitalization, very important. We don't want to stop with that instruction because, especially for our early writers, it is so important. But just as much emphasis needs to be placed on grammar instruction.
Absolutely. All right, so one of my favorite quotes ever is this quote by Constance Weaver, and that's that teaching grammar, divorced, keeping it separate from writing, doesn't strengthen writing, and actually even could waste time. So one of the things we wanted to talk about a little bit right now is what our current practice is in our district with regards to teaching grammar.
So the way that we're currently teaching grammar is through a skills practice book. What's great about a program like that is you're hitting every standard if you're doing those pages because everything corresponds to what we need to teach our students. But unfortunately, there are a few areas where it's maybe not the best way that we could be teaching grammar. I know especially in the early grades, A lot of our students are emerging readers. So that skills practice book, the sentences, can be a lot for our students to read at the beginning of the year. So we end up not being able to access it until a little bit later. And just think about all that great time that could have been spent on grammar instruction that we're missing out on. Another thing I notice is that for my students, a lot of them can independently complete those skills practice pages and get everything correct. And when it's time for them to use those skills in their writing, they're either not or they're using them incorrectly. So since it's so isolated, that translation into their writing, that application piece is missing.
And it's funny, we were talking about the fact that, yes, even in these sort of workbook pages, yeah, there is definitely a correlation between the activities and our standards. But one of the important things to keep in mind is that what the standards say is that the students should be using these skills. And, you know, I don't know that that's always something, as Meredith said, that we're seeing happening. So that's where we've decided we are going to kind of do some rethinking about how we want to approach our grammar instruction this year with the kiddos in Meredith's first grade class, because really the very first thing we needed to start thinking about is to sort of lay out all of the grammar skills that we need to teach this year. So it doesn't matter what grade level you're in, you know, something you'll want to think about is what are all of the sort of grammar concepts that I typically teach? And you want to reframe your thinking in a way that asks the question, you know, how can I frame this sequence in a way that helps build sentences from the most simple to perhaps the most complex? So what we've been talking with the kids about already is building those strong sentence muscles, which of course they get super excited about that. And, you know, in the beginning of the year, some of what we're doing with the students is actually even a little bit of a review, but really talking, as you know, Meredith's been doing some work with the students about what does a sentence need to have. We've been talking about the subject and the verb, the nouns and the verbs in the simple sentences. So once we kind of work through that, then we're going to amp it up a little bit, start to add a little bit of more weight and complexity to our instruction by talking a little bit about verbs and how, you know, what their role is in the sentence and how they interact with the different parts of the sentence. We'll be getting into things like verb tense, subject-verb agreement, things like that, so that we can kind of, again, at the sentence level, make sure the students are comfortable there. Eventually, we start to talk a little bit more about pronouns, and then working our way up to this whole notion that we want to help give students the tools, the grammar tools that they need to build bigger sentence muscles and expand their sentences with things like prepositional phrases and conjunctions. And again, when we talk about the parts of speech, it's not going to be about just naming them. It's going to be really about understanding what their job is in the sentence so that when they're crafting their own sentences, hopefully they can be thinking about these things as well. So once we thought that through, and once we took a look at all of the skills that we need to teach or need to review and teach to our first graders in this particular classroom for the year, we had to sort of think about a model for what we want this instruction to look like. And what we realized is that the gradual release model is something that gives us just such a strong idea for kind of how to make sure students are engaged in this learning. It's something that we use all the time in many other areas, but we were joking about the fact that when you think about the gradual release model, it's all of the teacher modeling first, then we're going to do this all together, students and teachers, then you guys, the students, are going to work on something, but we'll still be there to guide you, and then ultimately we want the students to think about how this applies to myself and my learning all the time. Now, the funny thing we thought about immediately was, and this is why we knew that maybe we can't keep working on these grammar skill practice books the way we are, because what would that look like with the gradual release model? We were saying, okay, I'm going to model circling that noun in the sentence for you. Now we're going to circle this other noun in a different sentence together. And then now you're going to circle another different noun in a different sentence by yourself while we watch you. And then we realized, okay, wait, when they're doing that on their own, besides in a workbook, where in the world is it really that important for them to be doing this work? So Meredith's going to talk a little bit about how we've sort of modified this gradual release model to sort of fit the needs of the work that we're going to be doing with the kids this year.
So like Candy said, we wanted to take that gradual release model for grammar instruction. So I'm going to give you an example of something I did this week with my class at using the gradual release model to teach what a sentence needs to include. We talked about the who and the what of a sentence. So a lot of times we get caught up trying to find these great models or coming up with our own great sentence. When we're teaching writing instruction, there are fantastic mentor texts that we're already using. So we decided, why don't we lift a sentence from one of our mentor texts we already have and use that for our instruction. So what we did was we used our mentor text for the week was All by Myself by Mercer Mayer. So we started by looking, what did Mercer Mayer do for a sentence? I can get out of bed all by myself. I can button my overalls. I can brush my fur. There's so many great examples of a simple sentence there. So then I was able to write my sentence and I model for the students something that I can do. I can tie my shoes. I can make a sandwich. So we had a lot of great examples there. Going back to that model. Then together, we brainstormed on chart paper some sentences of things we could do. We used our ideas we shared together. Then we had that piece where they were practicing and I was able to guide them. They had their whiteboards on the rug. They were writing their own sentences and I could check in at that point to make sure that they understood what a sentence needed to include. Then it was time to go back to their seats and work on their writing for the week. And they were able to translate it into their writing. So this was a great way at the beginning of the year in September to lay that foundation of the way we're going to be teaching grammar this year. I wanted to show you that was a very simple sentence, just learning what a sentence needs to include. I want to show you an example of a mentor text that we use later in the year. One of my favorite mentor texts is such a good book, Wait and See by Robert Munch. So we lifted, again, using that strong mentor text, lifted a sentence out. We found there was snow at the bottom of the door, snow at the middle of the door, and snow at the top of the door. If I was writing a story for my students about maybe going to the beach, I was thinking a model I could use is there was sand in my hair, sand in my bathing suit, and sand all over the living room floor. So you can use any sentence. Look in those mentor texts you're already using, and you have that strong grammar model. I think that's so important for students to see how it's connecting back to their writing and what their mentor text is. So throughout the year, starting with those simple sentences, going to that more complex sentence structure, we're able to use this model of the gradual release to help with grammar instruction.
And it's awesome too, because it really is helping us take a more inquiry-based approach towards grammar, because what we want the students to start with this model is, what did that author do? Let's really take a look at that sentence and figure out what the author's using about what they know about grammar to create those better sentences so that the readers have a better picture in their mind. And again, if we compare and contrast this to, what we've done in the past, it's hard to get to that final step of that model where the students are actually transferring what they're teaching to what we're teaching them to their writing. And we're hoping with this that we'll definitely see a change with that.
Absolutely.
So as we've been moving along then with this work, one of the things that we wanted to do first, though, because again, we have an idea for our sequence of grammar instruction for the year and what we know we want to teach the students according to our standards, but we also want to see what they already can do on their own and what they already know and think about sentences. So one of the things I'm going to kind of prep Jen, this is where we're keeping our fingers crossed here, because this whole magical world of virtual streaming and working with the amazing tech coaches from the Ed Collab has been awesome. And we're going to try in a moment to show you all a video. But let me just tell you before Jen plays it, what this video is all about. We kind of set up a scenario where we could have some pre-assessment conversations with students about sentences. All we asked the students to do, we gave them the very simple instruction to just write a sentence. We gave each student a sentence strip. And that's all we told them to do. It wasn't writing a whole piece. It was just write a sentence. And then we wanted, and we'll show you in a few moments, we prepared ourselves with some kinds of prompts and questions and things we would use to help foster some conversation among that small group of students. So Jen, if you're ready for us, if you can go ahead and play that video for us right now, that would be great.
Okay, let me just, one more second. Let's see. Oh, let's get the, you don't want to see me.
You look lovely, Jen.
Oh, thank you. Let's see. All right, technology.
Is it muted?
Let's see. Mute audio. I don't know why it's not working now. Let me get rid of you. Oh.
Period. Oh yeah, that's a period. Yeah, but in our school, it can be called anyway. Yeah, in our kindergarten, in my kindergarten, I also call it a period. I know. First grade, we call it a period.
All right, you know what? Let's talk about that for a minute. Why don't you keep writing? Because I have a question for you. There's some conversation about a period or punctuation. What do you mean by that? Where can somebody show me a period?
Like this. Like this.
Okay. Why do you have that there? Why do you put that
Because
there?
then it tells you like it's the end of a sentence.
Oh, so that tells you that it's the end of the sentence.
But like if I wrote this sentence and I erased this, then like no one would know that if I want to write.
Oh wait, so like if we then put these together, what would happen? How would somebody read this sentence?
I love my brother the most. I like being up here.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Oh my God, I think you better put that period back there. That's amazing. So, but what's punctuation though? I heard somebody say a different word. Punctuation. That sounds very fancy. What's that mean?
What is that? Punctuation means a period.
It means a period. Okay, so you're thinking those are just two different words for the same thing?
Yeah. Well, they're actually kind of the same.
What do you mean by that?
Like they're basically the same thing, but they just have different names.
They're basically the same thing, but they just have different names.
Okay. So stop video.
All right, are we back, Jen? Awesome. So that was just a little bit, it might have been a little choppy there in the beginning, but one of the things, again, as we said before, we just had the students kind of talking about their sentences that they had written. And one of the surprising things that came out of that particular conversation was the fact that we learned, indeed, that many of the students in Meredith's class are thinking that a period and punctuation means the same thing. They're not realizing that a period is just a form of punctuation. So that definitely was something that gave us an interesting opportunity to have conversation with the students about that. But, you know, in our conversation, we definitely talked about a lot of other things too. We kind of, you know, again, we were asking students questions like, how do you know that's a sentence? Who's your sentence about? What is that subject doing in the sentence, and so on and so on. And one of the other things that kind of came up during this opportunity to talk with the students was this notion about if you read your sentence to a friend, what do you think they might picture in their mind? Getting the kids to kind of see the fact that sometimes the ideas they have in their head, they think they're on the paper, but they may not be there quite yet. So that's actually one other thing that we definitely learned a lot about through doing this experiment. And we actually, I'm just going to ask Jen to kind of play our next video for us in a moment, because one of the things we realized is that we hadn't even anticipated this, but in getting the students to actually talk to one another about their writing, it actually gave some of the students some ideas for other things that they could do to their sentences. So Jen, if you're ready, we can go ahead and show that next clip as well.
Okay.
Read this to me first.
I love my brother the most.
So if somebody were to read that sentence, what do you think they would picture in their minds as they were reading that
My
sentence?
brother and me.
Yeah, how would they picture you? What kinds of things do you think they would picture you doing?
Me and my brother love to play.
Okay, does this sentence talk about playing? No, not yet,
Or
right?
sometimes like if I when I wake up and my brother just lays down, I climb up on him and then I lay down on him.
Fantastic. All right.
I'm not done. I'm not done. I just forgot. TH at the end. W-I. No, it's W-I-T.
Okay. All right, so I think we're back again, and it's hard to tell exactly what was going on right there, but one of the things we wanted to highlight is if we go ahead and we wanted to show you this little guy, Rohan here, his sentence, this was one of the students that you were watching, he was sort of on the left side. Before the students had that conversation, Rohan's sentence was, I like to help my mom. And then there was a period at the end, and that was the end of it. And as we started to talk about, you know, what those sentences were actually saying, he realized through that conversation, we watched him actually erase his period, go back, and now he revised to say, I like to help my mom to exercise, period. So again, having that conversation with all of the students about, wow, what would your reader picture? It actually, without even saying anything to this particular student, he went back and added on. So that was something we thought was an interesting observation that we learned from having these sort of small conversations with the students about sentences. All right, so again, one more time to kind of keep ourselves grounded, yes. Meredith, I'm going to ask you to kind of go ahead and remind us why we're here.
All right, so our pledge this year, we are relentlessly and passionately writing sentences. And we're going to use what we learn about grammar to write even better, stronger sentences with our students, getting those big, strong sentence muscles.
Absolutely. And this year, again, as we said earlier, what we wanted to talk with everybody about this morning is the idea of what kinds of things you could set up in your classroom right now from the very beginning of the year to support this work. So as you can see here, you know, with the rest of our time together, we're going to talk through 4 fairly simple things that we think you can put in place right away that will allow you to support this instruction with your students.
So the first thing we wanted to do was have this strong metaphor. We wanted some sort of common language that we could use throughout the year. We wanted something that really grounded our work for the year. So Candy had this great idea that we could tie it to music. So we were very fortunate that we worked with the music teacher. We came into the last 5 minutes of my students' music class. But what we're about to show you is definitely something you could easily do in your classroom just using a few instruments. So what we did, I'm just going to tell you a little bit about the video and then we'll watch it. Candy came in. She was so excited to show my students
yes. I have mad music skills.
She really practiced hard. And she had a song that was the same note over and over again.
Oh, yeah.
Then another supervisor came in and they had a song that her song that she was playing had a few more notes to it and the students could compare those. Then I'm very lucky I have a brilliant pianist in my class he's amazing. And his parents had sent in his sheet music. So then we invited him to come up and play his song on the piano that he has been working very hard on, practicing all the time. And the students were blown away at the difference between that very simple song that just had one note or even a few notes and that song that had so many notes, so much detail to it. So we're going to watch that unfold now.
Yeah, thanks, Jen. If you can get that next one ready for us.
Okay.
Ready?
Ooh, round of applause.
Wow. So I've been working on a song too. I wrote a song too, and I've been working really hard. Can I play it?
Absolutely.
Okay. Are you ready?
Wow.
That's really good, and it's also a lot better.
Did you think so?
Well, Mrs. Mulligan, I think you played that one note really well.
That one note was really hard
Yeah.
over and over and over again, but that was beautiful.
Was there something different about mine?
It just sounded maybe like there were more notes.
I think maybe I did use more notes.
Yeah.
Well, mine had more. Oh, is there someone else who might know another song?
Isaac, you know a song?
Would you like to come up and play?
Does your song have more notes than that?
Where are you?
Oh my gosh. Wow. Oh, I'm so excited.
We were practicing.
I knew my song in my head.
Have you been practicing for a long time too, Isaac? Let's try. I can't wait to hear.
Ready?
Oh, but that's okay. We are so excited. Sometimes it can be a little nervous, but we are so excited to hear it. You're going to do amazing.
All right. Well, definitely that was Isaac. That was
Yes.
awesome. We were so excited when that happened because it just, again, that's what we were hoping for. We were hoping for that strong metaphor so that we could figure out if we could connect kind of what we did with the students in the music class with what might happen when we got back to do sort of a writing workshop mini lesson with the students. And I think, Jen, this is our last video, but we're going to let the video speak for itself.
Yes.
to talk about the fact that we think that it worked. So hopefully last video and we'll see what happens.
Boys and girls, Missy and I worked really hard and we thought about the video and we came up with what we think is a really good sentence that describes the video. Can you read it with me? Stanley jumps. Pretty good, right?
Yeah, he actually made it. He like ran and jumped. That was a good trick.
That was a good trick. All right, Mrs. Mulligan, do you have it?
I actually did. I
All right, class.
I did.
You hold the other end.
Here's my sentence. All
That
right.
is long.
Oh my goodness. All right, let me see if I can read it. Stanley jumps gracefully through the hoop like he is flying through the air.
Oh, our sentence doesn't sound so good anymore. Oh, what do you mean? Yours has so many more words and it tells more about what Stanley's doing.
This is sounding familiar.
Yeah. Does this remind you of something in music class? Alexander, what does it remind you of?
So actually, so you probably Stanley jump, but she rated more. So she rated like more sentence.
There are definitely more words in my sentence.
Does that remind you anyone of music?
But you try more and more.
Isaac, what does that remind you of from music class?
It's kind of like the music notes. So pretend this is mine, and this one is hers. So it's like
Wow.
it's like
So wait, so as a writer,
writer, I'm more like you. Kind of, because I wrote a lot more, right?
Yeah, but in music class, it's kind of like, this is my notebook, and that's kind of like what you played, and like I played like a lot more. This is like not really.
All right, boys and girls, Missy and I.
Yes, so as Isaac said, I wrote a lot more, just like he played a lot more. And again, that's kind of what we want the students to think about. Because now, do you want to sort of talk about the bong bong?
Yes. So our common language that we really wanted to use throughout the year, when students have a simple sentence, just like Candy played a song, it was a song, but it was a very simple song. It was kind of like bong, bong, bong over and over again. So what we are calling our simple sentences this year are bong, bong sentences, to help them realize, okay, it is a sentence, but we really need to be adding more details for our reader.
Yep. And as we continue to do the work with the students, obviously we can start out with some of those simple sentences to kind of ground the work that we're going to be doing, but then come back out and teach students a lot more strategies that they can use to kind of add on to those sentences. So one of the things that we also knew that we would need this year is sort of a space for the students to do this work together. So we've already given the students something that we are planning on calling a sentence sketchbook this year. And it's a little bit different than what might be their writer's notebook or any other place where they might do their writing of their actual full process writing pieces. This is a place where kids are going to get the chance to literally just play with sentences. We talked to the students about how artists keep sketchbooks so that they can kind of practice and dabble in their art and try new things and not be afraid to take risks and try things. And that's what we want this sentence sketchbook to be. We want it to be a place where each time, and if we can take you back to when we talked about that gradual release model for this sort of grammar instruction that we're trying this year, we want that to be the place where students actually go in and that they try things on their own and that we can actually keep sort of ongoing evidence of that. One of the things, particularly working with our younger writers, is it's wonderful to have the students do this work in a notebook, because from the very beginning of the year, there's a huge difference between what the students are able to do at the beginning all the way to the end. So again, it's nice to kind of have that track of that progression, just keep it in one place. So the students were super excited about their sentence sketchbooks, and we're excited that that's going to be a place where they'll be doing that work all year long.
And we love that Candy wrapped them, because it really made it a present. It made it a really memorable day for them. So something else we wanted to do, and this is something definitely you can all do in your classrooms, is we really wanted to give our grammar work real estate in the classroom. We wanted it to be front and center. We wanted it to be really important. So we dedicated a bulletin board in my class this year to our sentence of the week. And back to that bong bong sentence that Candy was talking about, we had a bong bong sentence every single week that we're going to post. This week, it was the first day of fall on Monday, so the bong bong sentence was, I like fall. It's a sentence, but it doesn't tell my reader a lot. So we challenged the students this week to find ways to strengthen and make that bong bong sentence really, really strong. So throughout the week, this was a great fast finisher activity. This was fun to do during writing, and it gave all the students an opportunity to try out and play with that sentence. We then put some on sentence strips, and I'm going to go back to where the board is, and you can see that we highlighted a lot of the writing, and this was a great way to really get all of your students involved and highlight all of the sentences they can do. What I love about the Sentence of the Week challenge is that you can really tailor it to what's going on in your classroom. We did fall this week. Next week, I'm going to tie it into what we're learning in social studies. Throughout the year, we can put pictures on there. We can, anything going on in your school community. It's just a really fun way to have that grammar be infused throughout the day.
Yeah, I think it's great. And one of the things we're going to continue to talk about is also how to make sure that all students can access this kind of work together, because some of our students, we realize early on in the year, maybe are not able to add the kind of detail that you can see there in some of the examples that already Meredith has up on this board. But with some of our students, even giving them sort of, if you were to take a sentence strip and revise and add on to that simple bong bong sentence and kind of write a sentence, cut up the words, put it in a baggie, and allow students to kind of manipulate the words in that baggie to kind of form sentences. Even practicing with that for some of the students who may not have the writing, they may not be ready yet to do the writing, but even to just help them see how they can add on to that sentence would be a great way to go. The last thing that we wanted to mention, because we're definitely getting close to the end of our time here, but I think our timing might be actually pretty good.
I know.
Is the fact that we want to, and remember what we said before, we want to relentlessly, okay, talk about sentences this year with our students. So one of the things we want to make sure that we're constantly doing is stopping and recognizing the students for trying the things that they are learning. So we've talked about the idea of sort of highlighting star sentences, whether that's individually for students in their own writing, where we, again, we don't always have to look at the entire writing piece when we're conferring with students. We can highlight one star sentence and talk about how we noticed that the students took the skill that we taught them during that lesson and applied it directly to their writing, and show them, what an impact that has actually had on their writing. But we've also talked about, sort of recognizing more permanently the students, perhaps finding a place to take pictures of students holding up their great sentences that they're writing. If students write a fantastic sentence in their sentence sketchbook, maybe give them, I think we're going to be going through a lot of sentence strips this year. Maybe give them a sentence strip, ask them to write that sentence, and again, highlight it so that everybody can see the fine work that the kids are doing and thinking and talking and writing their sentences together. So we're hoping, again, that will help just give us a way to constantly emphasize the work that we're doing with the kids. So that kind of brings us just about to the end of our time together. And again, what we hope that you got out of this was just the notion, and just the notion of starting to think about how you could look at your grammar instruction a little bit differently, so that it might have a stronger impact on the sentence fluency, which is important work that we're doing with our student writers all the time. We've got a couple places we just wanted to remind you that you can follow and learn along with us. Meredith and I are both on Twitter.
Yes, I just got Twitter for this project. I'm very excited. So please follow me so I can have some followers. I'm at Mrs. Alvarez 104, and Candy is at BRRSDELAK4. And we also have both of our emails posted. Please reach out to us with any questions you have. But we really want to see what you're doing in your classrooms. We'll be posting a lot of our star sentences, our sentence boards, using that hashtag strong sentence muscles.
Woo! Yes. We really thought that it would be awesome to kind of start this campaign where we can sort of, highlight the students and their sentences, and this would be a great way for you to join in with us as well. So please go ahead and don't hesitate to use that hashtag. And I hope that, you all enjoy the rest of your time learning today with the Ed Collab. It was such a pleasure to spend time with everybody this morning.
Yes, thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. See you soon.
Thanks everybody for watching. Please make sure that you tune in and follow the Ed Club on YouTube so you can watch these over and over again. And thank you to Meredith and Candy. Hope you all have a great day.
Bye. Thanks.
Bye.